you.
Good afternoon. Look, it's a huge honour and privilege to welcome the Duchess of Cambridge and Dr. Biden to this important discussion about early years. We know so much more about the importance of early years on ensuring that young people are able to flourish. And Your Royal Highness's commitment and advocacy on this issue over many years, listening to experts, practitioners and parents, and making a long-term commitment to this work has been a real inspiration. Dr. Biden, as a teacher, I have to tell you that there was a cheer from teachers all over Britain last November, and having someone with such a distinguished career as an educator in the White House is a real cause for celebration. So my name's Ed Van Care. In 2012, inspired by educational models in the States, I set up a school, Reach Academy Feltham, which has grown into a cradle-to-career model of support for young people. And I'd like to introduce our panel. So we have Professor Eamon McCrory, Professor of Developmental Neuroscience and Psychopathology at UCL. We have Dr. Trudy Senivaratne, Registrar at the Royal College of Psychiatrists and Perinatal Psychiatrist at the Maudsley NHS Trust. And we have Owen Thomas, the Head of Programs at Future Men. Hi. And then joining us remotely are some distinguished guests from the United States. Miriam Calderon, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Early Years in the Department for Education. Miranda Lynch-Smith, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Human Services Policy at the Department for Health and Human Services, and Katie Ham, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Early Years Development at the Department of Health and Human Services. So, before we hear from our guests, I wanted to hand over to Your Royal Highness to say a couple of words.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you everyone for being here today and from overseas as well. But I wanted to just say a personal thank you and welcome to you, Dr. Biden. It's a huge honour to welcome you here in the United Kingdom, and I hope you'll enjoy the discussion today, and thank you for your interest in this work. So very much looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you.
Thanks. And I want to say thank you for everybody for this program today. Thank you to the Academy. I met some wonderful teachers and principals and most of all, the children who were so inspiring and so well behaved. I know I couldn't get over it. But, and I want to thank the press, too, for covering this, because early childhood education is so important to lay the foundation for all of our students. So thank you for having me and for inviting me here. It's a very special place, I can see that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biden. So as we sit in this lovely school, and as a career educator myself, I've seen the challenges children face before school. That means that very often they're not ready to start school. And I've also seen the impact in my own community of providing that holistic support for children and families right from conception onwards. And I do think that schools can be real anchor institutions for communities and for families, providing space, integrating services, and signposting the support that is available. Eamon, I'd love to come to you. Could you tell us a little more about the first 5 years of life and what we know is happening to children in that time?
Sure, Ed. So I would say that over the last 20 years we've learned a huge amount about the importance of that period of life. And I'd probably highlight two key areas. One are findings from longitudinal studies that have tracked children right from birth, and those studies are now reaching individuals well into middle age and adulthood, and they show really robust associations between early development and long-term outcomes, so physical and mental health outcomes as well as educational outcomes. And detrimental experiences such as maltreatment or parental mental health problems can really derail those trajectories in life. So development doesn't stop at 5, but there's no doubt that those early experiences, relationships, environments influence our adult selves in a profound way. And the second area, if I could, just my own area of research is on developmental neuroscience, and I know, ma'am, this is a real interest, and your visit to UCL focuses on understanding that link. How can we understand the link between early experience and long-term outcomes? We know that during that period, children are going through massive maturation. The brain reaches 80% of adult size by the age of 2. Connections are being formed, neural connections are being formed, millions every minute during that period. But talking about brains, talking about synapses, you can think that that's a really biological process, but actually what we know is that humans are exquisitely social animals, and it's really the social experience that drives that process the ordinary magic of reciprocal, consistent interactions between the caregiver, between the father and mother and the child, really drives and strengthens those neural connections, forming the basis of secure attachment. And Trudy, I think this really fits with the kind of work that you do.
Absolutely, Eamon. So it's the story absolutely starts at the beginning, and that's, I guess, as a perinatal psychiatrist, we start from preconception onwards. We'd love to get to teenagers to educate them about when to have babies in the first place, but actually preconception, conception, that's where it has to start. And as you said, decades of research tell us that parental mental health has a direct impact. That's so critical on the short and longer term outcomes for the child, and we don't need to repeat that research. We just need to take the world forwards, don't we? So that's absolutely critical. And also global research tells us at least a quarter of mums have mental health problems, but they don't go for help. At least 1 in 10, if not more, probably much more than that, fathers have mental health problems. But we know that stigma just stops, stigma from mental health problems stops us from seeking help, and that's really critical. And the Duchess's fantastic work on the Big 5 insights, that was one of the factors that actually 90% of parents said they knew that their own mental health affected their children, didn't they? But they also said they didn't quite didn't ask for help.
10%, I think, did anything. Well,
exactly, 10% actually did anything about it. Exactly. So huge amounts around stigma, and the issue also of intervening early. I think that's so we can't underestimate. There's no point intervening late on in the even at 4, 5 or 6 or at teenage time. The footprint, the mother is a biological and psychological container, and then of course the sort of input of the partners and families, depending on the diversity of that family unit. It starts at the beginning. So that's where we've absolutely got to start. And I'm really proud, actually, that we've had some expansion, and we need to do more, of perinatal mental health services across the UK, mother and baby units. We have 22 in the UK, for example, and the Duchess has visited one of them at least, but has seen for herself what happens in the mother and baby units. And that's, again, that's at the worst end of the spectrum when mums are really unwell, but actually we want to have a universal offer. And I think the final part, which again speaks to what Eamon is saying, is that we need to really give parents a suite of tools so that they know they're the key people, parents are, a suite of tools that really helps parents to understand the importance of the early years, the importance of the social, the emotional and the cognitive, as well as the physical development. There's too much focus on the physical perhaps, but actually parents are the ones that can really, if you teach people simple things like playing with your baby massage, infant massage, building up that relationship with your child, which then lays that footprint for later. I think that's what we know.
It'd be really interesting, Trudy, to hear from the work that Owen, that you're doing around working with dads specifically around this.
Yeah. So thanks to both my colleagues. We work particularly. We work in the third sector in the charitable sector, and we work directly with men and fathers and boys at different stages in their lives. I head up the fathers' work, and it's really important for me. I've been doing it for about 15 years now to be able to translate some of the messages that come from academia about child development and the importance of the early years to the fathers that we support, and encourage to get more involved as early as possible. We run antenatal programs, and we run direct support for dads who already have children. And I think sometimes, especially for those who are more marginalised and from more challenging backgrounds, they maybe don't have the easiest pathway into having that influence over their children's lives. So kind of making sure that fathers, men and the women and mothers in the families will understand the positive impacts of a positively involved father, the beneficial aspects that can have onto a child's development are immense, just like a mother. And I think, like any job, a job shared is a job halved, really. And I think if it's at all possible, when we're in changing times, it's the 21st century, there are many different models of families in the modern age, but I think it's really important for whatever the makeup of a family is, that fathers are really taken into consideration when we make planning decisions, when we set up our right legislation about who should be included in schools and in different settings, early year settings. We have to really make a big effort to include men to reach out to them to kind of break the traditional norms around who should be in these spaces, who should be doing caregiver roles. You know, men for a long time have been seen purely as breadwinners, and whilst that's a really important role, and we all really have to kind of make sure that we are stepping up to the plate in that respect, it's also really, really important to realise the benefits not only to the children but to you as well, and to your own mental health and well-being, of actually understanding and realising how rewarding it is to play an active role in the development and the lives of our children. I think at that stage I'll throw back to Ed.
Yeah, and love to hear perhaps briefly from colleagues over in the States, any reflections you have, anything that strikes you about the remarks that you've heard.
Yes, I'd love to jump into this conversation, really appreciate the important dialogue. You know, the brain science is something that we're all following, and it really makes a strong case for the critical importance of early intervention to influence the developing brain and start children on the road to healthy development. Due to their rapidly developing brains, young children are very vulnerable to adverse life factors and events that might occur during that time, such as poverty, systemic racism, and experiencing trauma. For example, we know that children living in poverty are more likely to experience developmental gaps in cognitive, language, and social emotional skills compared to their peers from higher income families. But those poor outcomes when young children experience challenges are not inevitable. Nurturing relationships with responsive caregivers, including parents, teachers, and other adults, can foster resilience. And we understand from the research that stable, secure, and responsive interactions with adults and relationships build and strengthen young children's brain connections and support their development. We also know that early childhood education can improve children's development, can counteract some of the disadvantage that some children face, and act as a protective factor against the future onset of adult disease and disability. So we find it important to have a strong early care workforce that is skilled, culturally responsive, and well compensated to match that incredible responsibility that they take on in this critical period in a child and family's life.
And I just wanted to pick up on something that was said earlier around the importance of bringing families to the table and just really underscore that point. We know that when we think about families with young children, it's a very diverse group. Their needs are changing with non-traditional work hours, irregular schedules. And so having parents at the table from the beginning to make sure that the program works for them, meets their needs, like Miranda said, is culturally responsive, I think is really important, and something that we've done in the Head Start program, which is our federal preschool program for young children in low-income families. Parents are on policy councils. They are really embedded into the DNA of the program, and we're actually working on updating our parent engagement framework, and we have a parent steering committee. So I would just underscore how important that is to the programs that we're thinking about as well.
Yeah, thanks. I would just jump in and add and kind of, I think, pick up on this idea and notion that was discussed about how you really can't detach the well-being of the parent and the family from the well-being and the outcomes that we want to see for young children in this incredible period of human development in the sort of first 2,000 days. I'll mention a survey that has been conducted during the last 15 months, the period of the pandemic in the United States, a weekly survey of families with young children. And what we've seen there is that, and the findings have showed us that, that the pandemic has taken a tremendous toll on caregiving, in particular material hardship, and specifically affecting Black and Latino families the most in our country, or at greater numbers, but that material hardship has led to increased stress for families, emotional distress, and then that has impacted children's behavior. But one of the findings that also showed up in the data is that for families that had more emotional support, that acted as an important buffer from some of the most negative effects and consequences of the material hardship. So this isn't at all in any way, shape, or form to diminish the consequences of not being able to pay your bills or, to not be able to put food on the table, I think, but opens up, I think, a whole range of ideas and possibilities if we can think about how we wrap ourselves around families, right, and set as a goal really making families feel supported and having that emotional support in their role as caregivers.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I think so much of that resonates. I think particularly that parental voice piece, and I can say for my own organisation, it has been transformative. I was really challenged. I was asked how often I had a conversation without an agenda, and I realised that I very, very rarely did that. As a school leader, you may sympathise, but actually when we've started to listen, and I think that's been such an important part of your Royal Highness's work, really strengthening that parental voice and making sure that exactly the cultural responsiveness that Miranda was talking about is part of all of the services that we're offering. I think that's really critical. Yeah.
So can I ask?
Please.
So obviously this is all evidence-based, all your surveys and your findings. So how do we get this information out to the parents? Is it through faith-based communities? Is it the responsibility of the government? Is it the responsibility of the schools? Who should be carrying on this campaign?
I think, Dr. Biden, that's a fantastic question, and one we're struggling with in this country. The lack of real leadership in this sector, a kind of a set of collaborations that bring together the expertise, the evidence, the data, and provide an accessible forum for parents, for teachers to understand what we're learning from research. And I think there's that translation gap, and it's not clear at the moment who really can do that, because you've got education and you've got health and you've got perinatal care. It's a very fragmented picture. So really thinking about how we can convene a set of framework really to bring that together, to forge relationships between those parts of the sector, but really ensure that translation piece, that the information gets to the people who need it. I think that's a big challenge that we currently face, at least in the UK.
But I think maybe we have started that story, actually. So I think the transformation of perinatal mental health services and infant mental health services in this country actually feeds into that wide, the universal agenda. So,
exactly.
It's very different today compared to 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, when I think back. But it is that integration piece, parents, at the table as the most important, but with health and social care and the early years education, but everybody together. So I think it's combined. We need to bring that together.
I've heard that there are you have both quite a busy day, and I'm under strict instruction, so I feel like we could carry on talking about this for a long time, and it's been a really lovely discussion, but I'm afraid we're going to need to close in a few moments.
I have a million questions written down.
Well, I tell you what,
I have to give you a call.
You're most welcome to come to Feltham, but we'd love to hear any closing remarks you have, any closing reflections.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sorry it's so short. That's my first comment, because there's so much we need to talk about and to dialogue about, and so I just don't know where to begin. But as an educator myself, so much of what you're saying has certainly touched my life, in that I taught in a psychiatric hospital for 5 years, and so I see, I've seen the, what the children's environment and what, if it's negative, the effects that has, and I saw that with all the children that I saw in that psychiatric hospital and the problems that they were dealing with, and I have to say, I love that you're educating dads and fathers, because it's, it's been so long that for the longest time it was always the mother, right, who was doing the caregiving. But I think one of the positive parts of this pandemic is that now we've seen both the parents, because they've both been home, and the fathers are saying, hey, this is hard work, and they've pitched in. Yeah. And I know things are changing from, when our kids were little, but I think that the pandemic has also had a positive effect in that I think teachers are now working more closely with parents, because that relationship had to open up, right? Because there were so many areas where teachers were helping parents and parents were helping teachers. And so it's just such a fascinating discussion, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And I also wanted to ask about food security. I had so many things that I wanted to ask about, but I guess I'll have to just come back.
Definitely will. Your Royal Highness, any closing reflections?
I'm the same. I could talk about it for a very long time, and it's so lovely to see so many familiar faces. But just to pick on, I suppose, what's been discussed a bit about the importance of parenthood, and a bit about, I suppose, my own journey into looking into the importance of early childhood development, and just touching back on the conversations around supporting parents. I'm really interested about how could we best prepare the next generation to become parents themselves. So actually the focus isn't sort of on parenting itself, but actually how can we give them the tools so that they're having their babies and raising their children with these greater tools. And I think that's something that education all the way through the system, I think, would be really really powerful. But in terms of my own journey, yes, it's been about prevention, and I've really started looking into this work to see what we could do to help prevent some of today's tougher social challenges, whether that's addiction, poor mental health, violence and things like that in the home. And I suppose I've heard time and time again from the likes of Eamon, from parents, from practitioners, I like just how important the first 5 years of life are for future life outcomes. I suppose in listening to everybody, I suppose that's why this was for me really important. That was, to have this place where we can all come together, whether it's parents or neuroscientists or academics or those working with parents themselves, but just to really raise the importance of the first 5 years, because I really do feel the best investment for our future health and happiness lies in the first 5 years of life. But Ed, to your point, only by working, and I think Eamon, you referenced it too, only by working together in a holistic way are we going to be able to achieve that. It is the healthcare, it is the education system, it is working to translate the science for the parents, to make it accessible and usable, and making sure parents' mental health is best supported and all those around children, raising the next generation today. But ultimately, my hope is that we change the way we think about early childhood, really for generations to come, and I'm committed to this for the long term, and I hope our two countries can keep sharing data, knowledge and best practice for many years to come. But thank you for your interest today.
I'm sure we will. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your interest.
Well, look, thank you so much. And I have to say, on a personal level, about 4 years ago, we sat down at my school and we had a conversation about thinking about our pupils as the parents of tomorrow. And that was really transformative for us. What you just said really resonates. A huge thank you for your time. Thank you so much to colleagues. We hope that one day we might meet you in person. It feels like a long way off. And thank you so much, Dr. Biden, for joining us.
Thank you.
We look forward to this being the start of the conversation, and we're going to now move to some group photographs, I think.